Jake, welcome to the Democratizing SEO podcast. How are you doing today?
Hi, Austin. Yeah, I'm great. Thank you. Thanks for having me today. Really excited to talk to you about all things EEAT.
Thank you for accepting. I'm definitely looking forward to this. This will be a very interesting conversation. Now,
hmm
Jake, I am very curious to hear your response to this question, which is the question I ask all my guests who come on to the podcast. How did you get into SEO in the first place? How did you become an SEO professional?
Yeah, it's a great question. I feel you've probably got a lot of great answers from this because like SEO is one of those industries where it feels like everyone came from a different background,
Yeah.
which is great. There's a lot of good stories. So my introduction to SEO, or how I got into the industry, I responded to a job advert on, I believe it was Gumtree. This was in about 2010. And I didn't know what I was applying for. And it turned out it was like a black hat SEO job for a company who wanted me to, they sold like skin products and they had about 15 different websites. So I was doing a lot of like article spinning and things for their websites. The job advert didn't mention anything about search engine optimization. I was studying journalism at the time, and it was more of like a content management job. Um, and when I was doing that, I kind of realized what I was doing, and then from there started to learn more about search engine optimization and kind of the best practices rather than some of the more shady tactics. And then from there, I eventually moved into working in like an agency and working in house. And yeah, so that was my kind of like backdoor, I suppose, into the industry.
Okay. Yeah, that's strange. The recording didn't stop, but it said it wasn't recording for some strange reason.
Hmm.
But that should be all good. I think we're all set now, so we'll just continue on. Now,
Yeah.
EEAT, you have a very interesting you have interesting thoughts around EEAT. Take me back to when you first heard or saw Google's announcement around the extra E in EEAT. What were
Mm.
your initial thoughts?
So obviously the announcement, I believe it was around December last year, December 2022. And a couple of months earlier for that, I'd actually been taking part in a project about predictions for SEO in 2023. And I'm not saying that I can predict the future at all, but my prediction for SEO in 2023 um, was around the need to have that human element of experience within your kind of EAT, as it was at the time, strategies. I've been working with brands who were doing it really well in terms of bringing in like um, offline activity that they were doing and like promoting like real world events and workshops that they were doing as part of like EAT strategies. And so my tip for SEO 20, in 2023 was for brands to really connect like all of the different expert work that they were doing as part of their SEO strategy. So when Google announced the addition of the extra E of experience into the EEAT mix, um, I was quite smug in that it's something that I'd recently been talking about. But I wasn't really at all surprised, especially because at
Oh,
the time, oh, hello,
oh, there you are. Strange. It's
hi,
I don't know if it's internet issues or Riverside
right,
having bugs, but I'll have to splice this
yeah.
back in. It's okay. We can continue. You were saying you were smug when the extra E in EEAT was released, and I think
Yeah,
you had the right to be smug.
yeah, that's it. I'm not saying that I could predict the future at all, but it definitely seemed like the logical path in
Yeah.
terms of Google safeguarding itself from the rise of like AI generated content and kind of the floodgates that would open of people using those tools to create, content that may be useful to users, but really in terms of providing that good user experience for people searching through Google. They want to know that the content that they're reading and consuming has been, tested by a human. They've got the experience of that. It's not just a generative AI program or whatever saying this, we think this might be good, because obviously AI can't have that human experience. So yeah, I was feeling quite smug, but I wasn't necessarily shocked. And to be honest, overall, I think it makes sense. Like if we think strictly from a user's perspective, which I think sometimes in SEO we maybe get caught up about thinking purely from the perspective of someone doing SEO. But if you actually think of someone using a search engine, the concept of EEAT and building trust should realistically, if it works, only be a good thing for the quality of the experience and the content that they get as a result of their search.
So would you say then the additional E was absolutely influenced by the rise in AI or the popularity in AI in mainstream culture?
I wouldn't. It's tough to say if it was like a direct result of that. I think it probably, put it a little bit higher on the agenda. If you think in terms of, Google's thinking a couple of steps ahead, and it knows that AI is going to become, as big as it has within the marketing world. It needs to be thinking about how the algorithms and its guidelines are going to need to change for that. So I think Google's always kind of developing and trying to make its algorithm better for the user, which is where kind of EAT has come from. Yeah, whether or not generative AI kind of fast tracked the experience element of that, who knows? But the timing of the additional E being brought into the mix, the fact that that was just right as kind of ChatGPT was really taken off within the digital marketing world, it would be a big coincidence if the two weren't related.
Yeah, to me, it was almost a surprise to me. It came out of nowhere to me, because at the time I remember I was very much getting into ChatGPT, and then out of the blue it just seemed as though there was this release by Google, and then it was an additional E, and my initial thoughts were, this is kind of stupid. I was very used to eat as a phrase.
Yeah.
Now we say eat, EEAT. We're kind of used to saying EEAT now. But before that, it was we just said eat, right? I was thinking, okay, this is something that Google is aiming to influence marketers to focus more on. When you think of AI in search, how do you think marketers are reacting or responding to the whole AI revolution?
So in terms of like generative AI within search results and SGEs, it's an interesting one, because it feels like we're at the edge of a cliff and nobody really knows what's about to come, when you jump off that cliff, or when you fall off that cliff, or when you're pushed off that cliff, or whatever it ends up being.
Right.
It's people have been playing around with SGE and testing it and coming up with these like theories of what's going to happen. But we also need to remember that Google's SGE is still within that testing phase. It's still experimenting. So it's hard to make assumptions of what SEO is going to look like in 6 months' time, or whenever it's fully rolled out, because we don't really have anything to go off other than these tests. I mean, I do believe it is going to fundamentally change search. And I think from what we've heard from like Google employees recently about their plans and how much they're doubling down on AI and how much they see it as like a big part of their search product, I think SEOs would be a little bit naive to kind of just sit back and be like, that's all going to be fine. Nothing's going to really change. But until we have any kind of like, solid data or like a deeper understanding of what this actually means, it's so hard to try and predict what the search marketing world's going to look like in 6 months. And it's exciting. It's nerve-wracking. Don't get me wrong, it's very nerve-wracking. But to be in an industry that changes so regularly, purely down to kind of Google and search engines having to constantly develop, it means we have to constantly develop and stay on top of, the latest things and upskilling ourselves on, right, how can I be using AI? Or how should I be, thinking about AI? It's exciting, but nerve-wracking, definitely.
From a user point of view, and this is often quite difficult for marketers to differentiate themselves from keeping their marketing SEO hat on. But let's say from a user point of view, are you using any sort of like generative AI, whether ChatGPT or even, I don't know, something on Bing or testing SGE as a user yourself?
So I've been using ChatGPT within my like day-to-day work life, and I've been trying to experiment with ways that it can be useful. Or I've been like people within my team, I've been setting them tasks to go away and find out how this works best for you. Because ultimately, I think tools like ChatGPT are, I don't think they're necessarily going to take jobs completely away from people, but it's all about like using it as a tool for productivity. If we can be more productive through using them, things like writing meta descriptions or, content article outlines and things like that. Things that maybe used to take a bit of time for a human to do can be done in seconds. Obviously, there then needs to be that human element of reading through it, understanding like, does this make sense for the client that I'm working on? Does it have their tone of voice and things like that? There's always going to need to be that level of human interaction and QA and making sure that what the generative AI spits out is actually usable. I think the people who maybe just copy and paste from those tools and stick it on a website are probably the ones that in the end will suffer. But I don't see any harm at all in these AI tools being part of, your arsenal, just as any other third-party tool might be for when you're creating SEO strategies.
Yeah. You see, from the responses I've been getting around the use of AI as a tool, I should say, is it's useful as a sort of like a supporting tool. And when I think of search, right, I think, okay, and I haven't got my thoughts firmly formed on this, but just go with me on this journey. I'm thinking using search is very much a case of users are now, if you like, smarter than users 20, 25 years ago. When I say smarter, they know how to they know how to use search, right? SEOs are not the only one who knows exactly how to search for what they're seeking. And I think back to the way SEOs are using ChatGPT now, and I relate it to the way SEOs used search in the early days of Google. And I'm thinking, okay, this is leading into users being able to use search a lot better and quicker than users 20 or so years ago. My question is, if users now expect a sort of like assistive or supporting elements to using their search in order to find what they're seeking a lot quicker, to carry out their research quicker, if they have tools that are providing this support, i.e. ChatGPT, to some extent TikTok, right, and Bing and etc., and Google is not, what happens to Google's dominance?
It is a great question. You'd think from the standpoint of Google, they wouldn't want to lose the money that search brings them. So, and it's an awful lot of money if you think about the billions of dollars that it's bringing. So from their standpoint, they're going to have to adapt. If they see that search user behavior is changing and people are going to other platforms for whatever reason, and I'm pretty sure they'll have teams of people looking at that probably already, and they'll be thinking, well, how can we adapt our product to give people what they want, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you think of it, I know that they're very different platforms, but if you think of the way that Instagram has just released threads, just as Twitter was kind of self-imploding, and people are looking for that. As people are now realizing, right, there's better kind of search experiences, or we can get information elsewhere. Google's going to think, right, well, we need to keep those audiences or bring those audiences back. So I'm sure that they've got people working on it, and we might see the search product change further. I know obviously there's the whole AI element of it as well, but then in the most recent Google I/O, when they're talking about the using like multimedia search, so searching with images and text and things like that, or searching from within a picture on your phone. We don't really know how much that is going to really take off. Like, that feels like it's really in an early stage, and maybe a lot of users don't even know that you can do that. But like, there's so much potential in that as well, which obviously not any other platform, as far as I'm aware, has that. So maybe it starts to push those kind of USPs that it can offer that other tools can't. But yeah, it does feel like we're at that point, which I don't think we've been at for probably a couple of decades, where Google has maybe realized that people are seeing that maybe the grass is greener, or they can get what they want elsewhere. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Google kind of wriggles out of the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to say, out of the AI tools that I've used, I quite like Bard, even though the name is quite rubbish. I do think they have a very good offering with Bard, and I think it's something incorporating AI into search is something that Google has to do. Let me ask you this: do you agree or disagree with this statement? How can I phrase this? Are the brands who are going to win, quote unquote, win in search, are they going to have to remain aligned with Google, whatever Google is, Google search, I should say, and create value for users?
I would say yes, they are going to have to, because I mean, if a brand isn't creating value for users, then again, thinking from a user perspective, why would that user engage with that brand? Or if they do engage with that brand and they don't see the value, then it's going to reflect badly on the brand itself. And from Google's standpoint, Google, Google's product of providing people valuable information through its search engine relies on people finding value in the content that they get as a result of their Google search. So if Google, through all of its different user behavior signals, thinks that people aren't getting value from a particular site, then it's safe to say that that brand probably isn't going to be ranking highly. They'll probably get switched out for someone else who it thinks maybe can provide the value. So unfortunately, I mean, I think everyone is always going to have to play to Google's rules if they want to get traffic in Google. It's just the way it is, that, like I say, Google needs to safeguard the user experience on its platform. So that's why it has things like EAT to make sure that it's providing, useful, trustworthy, valuable content. And if a website doesn't want to play those rules, then, they're probably not going to last very long in the SERPs.
What would you say is considered valuable content?
That's a great question. I think it all comes down to user intent, really. Is your content giving the users what they want within their user intent? Is it giving them useful information, helpful content? If we think of the helpful content update, is our content really written for the user? Are you providing them with, in-depth information so that if they start reading and if they, have a question in mind, ideally they don't have to go anywhere else. They've got all of the information that they need right there. But the value really depends on what the user is trying to get out of the situation, because if a user is trying to buy something and you're writing maybe an informational content piece, like a blog piece, which somehow happens to rank, but a user lands on that expecting to be able to buy, I don't know, a pair of shoes, and you're just talking about the history of shoes, then that content is not going to be valuable to that user. That content might be valuable for a user who wants to know about the history of shoes, but maybe you've showed up in the wrong moment. So the value is really, I suppose, on an individual basis of what a user is trying to achieve with that search.
Can then valuable content be AI generated?
I would say absolutely. Like, it definitely can. I think, particularly within the mindset of EAT and that human experience, there's always going to be that question of, can that AI content really add a human experience element to the content? But if the content is something like, I don't know, how to make scrambled eggs, something that is fairly simplistic and is just like, these are the steps you need to take, then like, realistically, I'm pretty sure ChatGPT could do a good job at telling me how to make scrambled eggs. But if I was looking at what are the best fishing rods for a particular type of lake or a particular type of fishing, ChatGPT could probably give me some good starting points for a piece of content. But really what you need is somebody who is an experienced fisher who can give you, look, these are what I've found best through my experiences. These might be useful for a beginner, but if you really want to be really good, this is where you maybe need to start looking. And I mean, it's not to say that in the future, generative AI may be at a stage, it's developing so fast. So I'm not saying that it'll never be able to give those kind of like human nuances to a topic, but right now it does still feel like we need humans to be part of that process. And if you think, again, thinking from a user perspective, if you're reading content which is, which has got a human face to it, and it's like, here is Bill, who's a pro fisherman, and here are his personal tips, I feel like you're going to trust that information a lot higher and probably find it more valuable than a piece of content that maybe has at the top, this content was generated by AI. Well, you're like, well, I know ChatGPT cannot go fishing. So, like, I trust this human giving me these tips over ChatGPT or AI, whatever it is, even if they are, very similar pieces of content. I think that kind of like that human element to it really is what kind of helps build that trust with the user.
You've said, you've influenced a lot of questions that's coming to mind. It's a shame we only have an hour, but okay, let me get through a couple of them that came to mind. So let's use the example you mentioned. I think the first one around how to make scrambled eggs, right? If I'm on Google and I search this and I see content and it's in text form. Text used to be the base format, the typical format for content. I
Yeah.
have a suspicion that video is going to be the new base format. And here's why I say this. If I search for how to make scrambled eggs, I see a text on Google. I search for it on Google. I see a text and yes, quite interesting. I do the
Hmm.
same search on TikTok and I see a
Hmm.
video that gets directly to the answer, explains it, and it's via a person. Let's call him Alex. The next
Hmm.
time I have a question about eggs, I search both on Google and TikTok. And again, on TikTok, Alex has the exact answer that I am seeking. I now
Hmm.
have a slight bias to searching for, not even searching, but just going directly to Alex's profile and looking for the information that I am seeking, right? And all
Hmm.
of this is leading me to be more brand aware. I no longer need to carry out a search on Google. If Google is not offering me the answer that I am satisfied with, why continue to use it? That's the first point,
Hmm.
right? The second point is, in this new reality that we're in, you have human created content and AI created content. And the only differentiating element is seeing a human, right? Seeing that human experience of a human explaining to another human the exact answer to the question that I'm seeking.
Hmm.
My question is the human experience the difference maker between AI generated content and human generated content? And is it going to be in the form of a video where you can see that this is a human person responding to the query that I have?
Hmm. Um, great questions. Starting with the video content, um, I think absolutely. Video is clearly becoming a bigger part of the search experience. If you think of like the perspectives, videos being added to SERPs and things like that. And
Yep.
also, again, like Google has been quite open about the how much it's been pushing YouTube Shorts. Obviously YouTube is a Google-owned property. Clearly,
Yep.
it sees there's a lot of value within the search area, within the video area of search. Sorry, so I wouldn't be surprised if for a lot of searches that the video results do become much more prominent because yeah, definitely if you think of the example of making scrambled eggs, I can watch a 30-second TikTok video, which gives me all the information that I need to know rather than having to read, a recipe page. And we all know about, the history of recipe content and having to scroll past the thousands of words to get to the bits that you need to actually get
Yep.
to. So I definitely think for certain areas of search and when it caters to the user intent, um, I think that video definitely makes sense to be kind of the lead media type, if you like. Um, the second question around the human experience being the differentiator. Um, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I think people who just copy and paste content from generative AI onto websites will probably get found out sooner rather than later. So while I've been talking about adding that kind of like human experience to the content, I think it will also matter in terms of like the human experience of creating that content as well. So, are
Right.
they are they reading through? Is there a human involved? You're not just taking something that generative AI kind of like spits out and puts that as fact. You can absolutely use that as part of the writing process, as I mentioned earlier, around coming out with like content outlines or briefs and thinking about how you're going to structure that content. Or if you write a paragraph of content and you maybe like, how can I make this more concise and to the point? Run that through, ChatGPT or another AI tool. I think there's like two elements to that human experience. There is the, those kind of human nuanced tips that maybe generative AI cannot give right now. But there's also that kind of like human part of the content creation process as well, which should give better content. Obviously, like I said, we'll see how generative AI develops, and I wouldn't be surprised if in a couple of years, probably even sooner with how quickly things are changing, it can write content as good as humans. So it'll be interesting to see how it changes. But for now, I think there needs to be somebody involved at each step of the way using AI rather than just giving AI a task and saying, right, there's the article.
Mm-hmm. How do you foresee content creation changing for SEOs? Right now, we still have some brands who unfortunately have SEOs more or less towards the end of the content creation. Some even after the content is created, SEO is brought in to optimize the content, which is a terrible approach, by the way. But how do you foresee content creators working with SEOs in this new reality that we're quickly headed into?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, I completely agree that when an SEO gets kind of shoved in as a last check before something goes online, and they go, "Can you add some keywords to that?" Like that stuff is like even pre AI world, that kind of content is probably never going to give you the returns that you want.
Exactly.
So I think really what like the job of the SEOs is to come with search data that informs content plans or gives ideas to the content creators about topics that we would like to start targeting. Like it, rather than being the last person in the line, like realistically, we should be the first or within the first couple, working together with the experts. Like the expert might be like, right, this is a really useful idea I have, or a really interesting idea on this topic. And then we can go like, are people searching for it? Where should that kind of sit within the priority list of content we want to create? So, I mean, I think regardless of like using AI or not, like SEOs need to be at the beginning of that process. In terms of like how AI changes that process. I mean, hopefully it doesn't take my job. Hopefully it's like I say, it's something that I can use to maybe dig into data quicker or to formulate ideas. Like I've been doing that recently with ChatGPT, where maybe I'm like, I've got a topic in my head for a piece of content, and I put it into ChatGPT, and I'm like, if you had an article with this headline, like what would you expect within that article? And it's really interesting to see what ChatGPT would put in there, because again, that's taken me out of like, right, these topics are being searched for. It's interesting to see if that aligns with what ChatGPT can give me in terms of like content structure and things like that.
Thinking about it from a macro point of view, does this then mean if SEO are brought in from the very beginning, let's say the briefing stage of content creation, doesn't this then mean EEAT will be more acknowledged outside of SEOs? So right now, you say EEAT to an SEO, everyone knows about it. You go broader outside of SEO, digital marketing, even outside of marketing itself. EEAT is less known. Do you think this will change in the coming, whether it's, I'm hearing an echo. Yeah, Riverside is very buggy right now, I think. I'll contact them after this. But EEAT, looking at it from a macro point of view, do you think then you will have more non-SEOs interested, or at the very least aware of EEAT?
Yeah, I mean, this is the dream, I think, in terms of like when I'm thinking about how brands should be thinking of EEAT. And I was reading some really interesting studies a few days ago about consumer trust online is decreasing. So this was a survey by GWI at the end of last year, and it was looking at consumer trust in relation to like rising costs, brands and their like sustainability pledges, online data safety and security and data protection and things like that. And it found that 78% of consumers don't trust big brands online. So I think if you come to a business and you show them those sort of statistics, that should really be like, even like thinking outside of SEO, that should trigger something within, brand managers, CMOs, whatever, that online brands need to be showing their credibility. They need to be showing that they're trustworthy. And from an SEO perspective, it's great because that's what we're trying to do with websites, particularly within your money, your life areas. But there's a much bigger question about how brands want to portray themselves online. And if a consumer, if a user, customer, whatever you want to call them, trusts a website, a brand that they're currently engaging with through the website, then obviously they're much more likely to actually go through and convert and engage with that brand, whether that's buying something or doing an action that you want them to do, if they trust the company that they're dealing with. So this is like EEAT is absolutely like important for SEO, but there needs to be these conversations that this is a business tactic that we need to be doing in terms of our website. This isn't just something that can come from the SEO team up. It needs to be something within a company that comes from the top down in terms of how a brand portrays themselves.
When I think of EEAT, I think of content. I think of keywords, of course. And I think of the traditional way of keyword research, which is very reactive. And I'm then led to think of a more proactive way of carrying out keyword research. And this proactive approach doesn't necessarily have the traditional metrics that we would seek, specifically search volume, search demand, right? In what ways do you think our approach to research will change in terms of identifying the contents that we recommend brands should be creating?
It's a great question, and I think like specifically in the context of EEAT, there's probably two different streams. There is like the business information content and providing enough content, around your business, around your policies and things like that, that shows you are credible and trustworthy. There's that element. And then there is the kind of informational content side of things. So starting with the business side of things, this might be an area where you can't necessarily do keyword research to inform that. Obviously, you might be able to find questions that users are asking about your brand, but really this content should be showcasing, like any accreditations that you've got, customer testimonials, what your returns and delivery policies are, what your data security and privacy policies are and things like that. And that kind of content is the type of content that really most users aren't searching for in a search engine. So if you're trying to do keyword research around that content, if you're looking at it strictly from a search volume perspective, you'll be like, this doesn't have any search volume. We shouldn't make it, which is obviously wrong, because that's the type of content that once a user has found your website, then, that's the thing that starts to build that trust in them. If they can see that, your 5-star Trustpilot banner across the top, that your Visa accredited at the bottom, like PayPal trust seal on the bottom, all those kind of things. These are the kind of things that kind of build trust, but maybe aren't part of a traditional SEO content strategy. Then on the flip side, where you've got the informational content side of things, so you're writing about topics that are kind of relevant to your brand or your products. I mean, historically that's obviously when you're looking at search volume to start informing, each piece of content. And I do think there is still a lot of value in using search volume as a metric to guide like initial topics. So if you're looking at, a particular area, we can say we know users are searching a lot more for this particular question or kind of theme. But then if you are engaging with, the real world experts within your business who know these topics inside out, they can then be like, right, I'm going to use that as a starting point, but here are all the things that I think are really important and really kind of valuable to a user who's searching for that, topic. So there's definitely still value in search volume. And, you can use that to even show these, content creators, these are what users are searching, and then let them kind of run with it and see what value they can add and additional points they can add. And, from their experience in the topics, what do they think are going to be the points of information that a user will find most useful? Like a user might not actually know, if you're coming into a topic as an amateur, you don't necessarily know what route you're going to take in terms of the information that you're going to find useful, or what your next questions are going to be when you read something. Whereas, content creators who are very kind of experienced within that field, they might know that, right, if someone lands on this page and they read this little introduction, they're probably going to have this question next, or they're going to have these questions next. So I'm going to write these questions, and it can kind of lead through that journey because they've maybe taken people through that journey before. They've had conversations about these topics. So yeah, that's kind of a long answer, but I definitely think search volume still has its place, but we also need to kind of trust content creators and humans a little bit more in terms of what they think is going to bring that value.
Mm. Something I'm noticing within the industry is a response to a problem that SEOs are having as they, if you like, rely more on being aware of one's industry, a brand's industry or business. And I say this to say, if you're carrying out keyword research or just research in general, right, to find topics around something to do with technology, let's say TVs, iPhones, mobile phones, this is something that everyone knows about, right? So researching it is relatively simple. The more niche you get, let's say you want to carry out research into the maritime industry or, artillery fibrosis. I'm not even sure if I'm saying that right, which is a medical issue, right? A medical term. This requires an awareness of the industry, and an SEO wouldn't necessarily have the time or background knowledge to carry out this research, right, effectively. So instead, they're relying more on industry experts and consumers within the industry. Specifically, they're relying on user-generated content in order to create the topics. And I'm looking at this from a macro point of view and saying, okay, is this going to create a rise in UGC, which is slightly different to influencers, right? Influencers, you're reaching out to someone to create content on their platform. Whereas UGC, you're contacting them to almost, let me see if I can say this appropriately. You're contacting a non-marketer to create marketing material for a brand. Do you think this is going to increase as experience becomes more valuable, or it already is, right, as a part of EEAT?
Yeah, I don't know if I've necessarily got a strong sway on if it will or it won't. I think it'll be really interesting because within like the perspectives filter within the SERPs, obviously they can pull in these, the video content, but it can also pull in answers that are like hidden within forums or Reddit and stuff like that, which Google thinks is going to be really useful. So I think really what we need to do is wait and see just exactly how once people have been using perspectives for a while and they're seeing that, how much prominence Google is placing on these answers that are like UGC hidden away in the depths of the internet. Because if what we find is that, Google is showing those types of answers, quite a lot, then I wouldn't put it past brands to then go and find that user, find their username on Reddit and try and contact them and be like, right. Google clearly thinks you're a credible source on maritime history. Would you mind, putting your name to some content and we can, reference that you are, an expert within that industry, or very knowledgeable within that industry. So it would be really interesting to see how that does play out. But I think with, user generated content, obviously that is content that's come from people with experiences, it's users who have that real world experience. So I wouldn't be surprised, if it does become kind of a bigger part of a strategy.
Yeah, it's fascinating times. I think we're headed into the biggest change in search history ever. And I'm very, very much looking forward to it. Jake, if there is one thing you would like all brands to know about EEAT, what would it be?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, and like obviously this is kind of the topic that we came in with today, is that I don't just think about it as something within an SEO strategy, because if you do that, then you're kind of setting yourself up to fail, because the whole concept of EAT is around these wider signals of a business or a brand or a website, which an SEO consultant or team or agency, they can't do those things themselves. Like an SEO team can't make sure that you've got good customer reviews, or that you've been reviewed externally by, people, or that you are accredited by relevant organizations to your business. Like SEO teams, we can't do that. As much as I would love to be able to click my fingers and have all those things in place, there's if you think of the chain of command within a business or an organization, these things need to be coming from much higher up the ladder than from the SEO team. You're going to be needing, the brand and marketing officers. You're going to need the CMO to be pulling strings. You're going to be needing design and developers. You're going to be needing the PR team or agency to be working on things. So as much data that we might have as the SEO team, we don't have the power to be pulling all those strings. So really what brands should be thinking about is, looking into the data about how people are, trusting brands and organizations online less, and thinking, right, well, what can we do about this to become trustworthy online? Not just because it can be beneficial for SEO, but really as a business, this is the right thing to be doing in terms of getting people to think we're a trustworthy business.
Well said, Jake. As I like to say, it takes more than SEOs to make SEO a success. Jake, thank you so much for your time today. Is there anything you would like to shout out or rave about?
I'd like to give you a shout out for having me on board, Austine. It's been a really interesting topic to discuss. And I think definitely when I was looking across the Democratizing SEO website and about, making SEO accessible and understood from people throughout a business, like you say, it's not just SEOs who can make that change. I thought that was a really interesting link to this topic. This whole topic has been about making EAT more than just an SEO strategy. So I thought it was a really good connection between the two there. So yeah, I just want to say thank you for having me on.
Thank you. Thank you for being on. You provided amazing insights, and I'm sure a lot of SEOs will be thinking, and non-SEOs as well, will be thinking of a number of things that you've said today. So thank you so much for being on, Jake. Have a brilliant day, and I'm sure we'll catch up again another time, Jake.